Thank you very much, the entire ATD Houston chapter. It's great to be able to come out to such an energetic and fun event and get a little bit out of the Midwest weather. It's thunderstorms and about 45 degrees up in Illinois where I'm from, so this definitely beats that right now. So, as Debbie mentioned, my name is Chad Udell. I'm the managing director at Float Mobile Learning. We're headquartered in the Peoria area. We just got a direct flight to Houston, so it was really easy to get here. That's kind of nice. Thank you, United. And we do a lot of work with the local chapter, the local ATD chapter up there with events and things like this, of this nature. We're also really involved with the national organization. In fact, they're the co-publishers of both of my books. ATD Press has been very kind to me. I've been working in this space for about 15 years and been building and designing custom software for just about that entire time. Really been focused pretty much specifically on mobile for about the last 7 or so years, and Float's been in existence for 5 of those. So, 5th year birthday here, and to commemorate it, last year we began compiling an anthology of some of our greatest hits, if you will. Created a dust up and fixed it all up, made it all nice. Created a few more extra new chapters and compiled it into an anthology which is now available. It's the Mastering Mobile Learning Tips and Techniques for Success. 50 chapters, 8 total authors, including myself and Gary. And it's a pretty exhaustive look at mobile, from a high-level strategic view all the way down to processes, practices, and even some tool suggestions. So we're going to give a little bit of an overview on the book and a deep dive in some very specific topics today. And I hope to have plenty of time at the end to open it up for questions. So I'm anticipating we'll have maybe time for 10, 15 minutes of questions if that's okay with everybody else. So, as I made mention, the book is divided into a few primary sections. Everything from the basics of how to understand what mobile learning is, because it is definitely a very different realm. I mean, we're talking about not just the fact that it's on these mobile devices, but really when we think about it, mobile learning at Float, and I think about it a lot. I think about the fact that the real mobile in mobile learning is the learner. It's not really the device itself. It's the fact that the employee, the people are on the go, right? We're talking about the fact that the employees are away from their desk. They're away from the training room. They're away from whatever typical learning intervention tools and platforms and systems that you might have available to them, and they need answers when they're on the go. They need to be able to access company resources, knowledge. They need to be able to gain access to experts and social tools that might be available for them in the workplace, basically in order to apply knowledge that they maybe have been supplied in the past, to learn more deeply about it, or potentially even fix something when it goes kablooey, right? So mobile is really great at fixing those types of things. We also talk a lot about strategic thinking in the book. How do we actually put a plan in place that's going to allow us to achieve success with mobile? The variety of and types of mobile learning, because there are so many different types of mobile learning really in the wild today, and a lot more even so on the horizon. How do you design and develop for it? And then how do you manage a sustainable mobile learning enabled culture and organization? So when we talk about understanding, we have a few things, and one of them I want to actually dive into really quickly is this concept of the shifts in enterprise learning, how things are actually changing. And this is really not even necessarily specific to mobile, but mobile is a great way that exemplifies just how learning is shifting and changing in the enterprise. Okay? So the 7 shifts in enterprise learning. And you may be familiar with some of these, or at least you're encountering them basically on a day-to-day basis. You may be seeing them occur in your workplace. You may even be partaking in them yourself. Shift in locational learning. How many of you, at least from time to time, take your laptop and go out to a park, or go out to a Starbucks, or go out to some other type of area where you're actually getting stuff done? Do you stop learning when you're there? Of course not, right? You're accessing company resources and information. You could be partaking in social networks. You could be partaking in social media. You could be working in Salesforce, doing whatever you might be away from your desk. A shift in the time. How many of you stop learning at 5 p.m.? You just turn your brain off. How many of your phones or your tablets stop beeping at 5 p.m. with work email? Just, it's done, right? It's not. The concept of the normal working hours is absolutely, I would say, a thing of the past. A shift in the context. How many of you have changed your rationale or your reason for accessing information maybe over the last few years? As opposed to, say, for example, word of mouth, learning about like reviews for a restaurant, if it's worth going to, you actually consult the cloud, right? You look up the information on Yelp. How many of you still carry around pocket maps? Right? So all of those types of things are changing. A shift in the amount of information. It's been said, Google's Eric Schmidt said that up until from the dawn of time until 2010, we had like, I don't know, something really paltry, a couple petabytes of information, right, that had been generated in all of humanity. And since then, we're basically doing that much like on a monthly basis, right? The amount of information that we need in order to do our job, to stay abreast of company trends, to stay abreast of industry, what's going on in the world, in order to manage tools and processes and people is doubling and tripling and quadrupling on the regular, right? We're under a sea of data, if you would. A shift in the location of that information. How many of you think you could probably find the safe source of the original pieces of content that you used to create your most recent learning module? Like the actual transcripts and maybe meetings and things like that with the subject matter experts. And there's a few people that are nodding, but other people are like, I don't know. And that's just the most recent one. So think about like something that you created 2 or 3 years ago. Would you even know where to begin if you needed to revise it? Or would you have to basically start from scratch and start over? Because the fact is the location and where we store information is changing dramatically and rapidly. And because of the fact that there is so much more information, we have to sift through this mountain of data. 2013 white paper from McKinsey estimates that knowledge workers spend about 1/3 of their time rifling through information repositories, SharePoint, emails, and so on and so forth on a day-to-day basis. And that's like, whatever, 10, 12, 15 hours a week just digging through emails, searching company networks to find information to do their job. That's not even their job. They're not archivists. They're not professional searchers. But we are turning our employees into professional searchers by the virtue of the fact that the information is scattered to the four corners, right? A shift in these learning experiences. No longer are employees, are people, really, satisfied with the simple read-only experience, right? They want to be immersed. They want to be engaged, and not engaged by like something trite, like a drag and drop assessment or something like that. They actually want to have an active hand in generating the content, in collaborating with their workers, in helping the organization get better. And mobile is a tremendous enabler of that type of collaboration and discussion. And then that leads me to the last shift, which is based off of that change in learning experiences by adding things like geolocation and instant search and always-on availability and the ability for people to upload photos and videos and share social information back and forth through the enterprise. We, as learning professionals, are experiencing a tremendous shift in control change, right? We're no longer the arbiters of all things learning in our organization. People are learning with Google. They're learning with third-party resources. They're hitting Twitter or going to Facebook or LinkedIn or lynda.com, which was just purchased by LinkedIn this morning, to learn, right? We aren't the only way that our employees learn. Not that we really ever have been, but we've tried to kind of have that illusion of control that we have been, right? It's not learning unless they went through us. That's not really the case anymore. Think about the last time that you used YouTube. You might have watched a cat video, but you probably actually learned something too. You know, I use it all the time, how to fix something on my car, maybe how to go down, my water heater goes on the blink from time to time, so I got to figure out how to get that restarted. And how do I do it? I learn on my tablet via YouTube. And those are all content pieces that were uploaded by somebody else. When we start to think strategically how we could go about implementing some of these shifts into our space, things get kind of dicey pretty quickly. And there's a really large amount of questions that need to be answered, activities and conversations that need to be had inside of enterprise. I was going to focus specifically here on one that I think is really interesting. It's in my nature. I have to provide an acronym or some sort of numbering system for everything. So I created a structure called the 6 Ps of a mobile technology strategy. And so what are we talking about when we actually are discussing the 6 Ps of a mobile learning strategy? From a technology perspective, we have to consider a few things. Hello, 6 Ps. We have to consider a few things. The platform or platforms that we're going to build, buy, support, implement, purchase, whatever, right? We're going to have to bring in potentially a revision to our learning management system, or say, for example, a content management system. We may need a system to manage the devices, or at least the data that's going to be on those devices. These are systems that are typically known in the industry as mobile application management, or MAM, or mobile device management, or MDM. And these are all new systems. It's yet another acronym you're going to have to learn, sorry. But these are ways that we deploy devices inside of the workplace and then manage the content that's on those devices. Procurement. How do we actually go about buying these devices? Are they going to be bring your own devices? Is the employee going to be bringing their own information and sources and devices into the workplace? Is the company going to be supplying them? How often is the company going to be buying new ones? What happens to the old ones? What type of service level agreement do we need? What happens to employee data plans when they use their personal devices to access company resources? All of these are the types of questions that need to be answered before you really can say that you have a full mobile learning strategy. Now, you can try mobile. You can go to deploy some mobile learning, I would say pilots and prototypes and things like that without having all this in place. But sooner or later, these 6 Ps are going to rear their ugly heads. Actually, they're kind of handsome, but and you will have to deal with them, right? So the policy that has to be put in place, it's got to be enforceable. It's got to be legally defensible. Really what you're trying to do is create things like end-user license agreements, terms and conditions, privacy statements, and understand that employees' activities, so that they know their activities may be tracked when accessing company data or companies using company devices on their own personal time to potentially tweet or do whatever they're going to do, because they will do it. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. Basically, this is kind of like the what-ifs, right? So you need to have policies that are flexible, that are adaptable, and that are going to probably make sense even a couple years down the road when wearable technology is out there, right? So they have to be flexible enough to work in a forward compatible way. We can't kind of box them in and confine them to what's available right now, because this space moves quickly. And I don't know about you, but my organization, or the organizations even that I work with, don't typically review and revisit their policies and procedures, you know, on a month-to-month basis. It's more like every year or every 6 months you might be able to crack open the binder and take a look at something like this. So we got to be thinking expansively. The process around designing, developing, and creating content that's going to go on them, but also the processes that are in place to actually provision the devices when they become on, the inventorying, right? How they get distributed, the process on how they get integrated with a single sign-on service, the processes on how they get hooked up to the Salesforce installation or the learning management system. All of these have to be put in place. These should reinforce your policy. See how these kind of all build on each other? The solution isn't really going to be dependent on any one individual from its implementation. This kind of process has to be something that's documented, should be something that's widely available and shareable, right? And that other people can potentially feed in on. I'm a huge fan of putting documents like this in a format like a wiki or something like that that is available widely through the organization, and that people of the appropriate stakeholder groups have ability to comment on, question, potentially even suggest edits, and keep it as a living document, because things are going to change. The publishing aspects of getting mobile onto these devices is also a challenge. We briefly mentioned mobile device management and mobile application management, but then you have to decide, is it appropriate for the company to be able to push new applications to an employee-owned device? Is it appropriate for us to just remove that application when the company wants to? Is it appropriate to go inside of the application and create new accounts, or require them to have a password on their device, or to potentially remove data or content from their contacts database? All of these are the types of kind of things that can be published or pushed to a device, and all of these are potentially learning resources, right? I mean, you're using the content management systems or learning management systems, obviously, to access knowledge repositories and information, but you're also accessing things like Dropbox. Is it okay to be able to publish company information and data to a system like Box.net or SkyDrive or Cloud Drive or whatever, or something like that, Amazon? Where does this actually live, and how does it get onto those devices? And then the last but certainly not least is the procedures. This is kind of what I would say is the full realization of all of these standards when they come together. The rubber meets the road. What actually happens? So without documenting those policies, without having a plan for procurement, without having an ability to purchase and provision these devices, the rest of the P's, there's no way that you're going to be able to help and create a standard operating procedure, right? So the eventuality of someone leaving a phone in the back seat of a taxi cab or dropping it off the side of a boat or something like that, if you don't have all of those other building blocks in place, that kind of what-if scenario becomes a pretty futile and very difficult thing to try and manage on an ad hoc basis. There should be very clear sets of policies and procedures then on how those policies get enabled. Okay. So varieties of mobile learning experiences. These devices are essentially like digital Swiss Army knives, right? They can do a lot of really cool stuff. And because of that, we need to think about them as much more than just another screen to push our content onto. It's not enough to simply make your content available on these devices. We should be looking at ways that we can use these devices and the technology that they offer to augment our worker, to provide learning experiences that are completely new and different, to assist them by taking advantage of sensors and cool things that they can do, but then also really to provide potentially even adaptive or personalized learning paths that make their learning experience their very own. These relationships that we have with these devices are very personal, right? How many of you have installed an app off of an app store? You don't even need to raise your hand because I know you all have. How many of you have customized your wallpaper on your phone? It's got a picture of your cat or your kids or wherever you want to go vacation next, right? And you start to think about all of those types of ways that we've personalized these devices, and far more personalization going on here than there is here. I'm going to lift up my laptop, but many of you might have the default Windows Rolling Hills background still on your desktop. It's entirely possible. Or you have whatever the company pushed out. It's like your company logo that's on there or something like that, right? We love these things. We have a very personal relationship with them, and by virtue of the way that they're always on, always connected, always in our pocket, always around us, it's the first thing that we look at in the morning and the last thing that we look at night, we can really, I don't know what I want to say, but get inside of our learners' heads. We know a lot about them. We know when they access their device. We know where they access their device. We can infer through usage history why they're accessing their device. So I like to put all of this kind of under this umbrella, which is covered in the book as this unique affordances of mobile devices. Now, in the book, we outline 24 things that these devices, these types of classes of devices are really good at. But I've been talking with Gary, and he's got 5 more that he wants to add to the list. So that'll be on like the next slide. It'll just keep spilling down below. But a lot of these are things that are kind of self-explanatory, right, or we use on a day-to-day basis. How many of you have taken a picture with your camera phone in the last day or two? Okay. You can actually use them to make phone calls. I don't know if you knew that. How many of you have sent a text message today? Yeah. So all of these are ways that we can get data into and out of the phone, and all of these then are obviously potential avenues that we can either access, create, or push learning content through them as well. You know, they're always on. I can individually address something, meaning I can send a specific message to one person, or I can send personalized messages to an entire workforce. They're really great at viewing media and video, right? They've got gestural commands, touch screens. They're obviously mobile. I mean, I put them in my pocket, I don't even think about it. Tablet, maybe not as mobile, as much like that, you know. I mean, I'd have to consider, like, do I want to bring my iPad with me? But, you know, for certain settings, it's totally appropriate. I'll definitely take it on site with me while I travel on an airplane, for example, right? So, mobile learning. Embodiment, that's probably a little bit less concrete because it's kind of an abstract term in the broadest sense. And, you know, we're seeing this come to fruition with wearable technology, but we're also seeing it with embedded sensors, like biosensors, right? People ingesting a scope, for example, to have their insides looked at, right? All of these are, for all intents and purposes, different ways of mobile learning. The fact that you have beacons, you know, or ambient learning, it's an embodiment type of tactic. You could have a beacon at a classroom. As somebody moves inside of it, then we know that they've attended a particular workshop, whatever it might be. Almost all of these are actually new. You know, and simply using the phone as a screen doesn't take advantage of just about any of these. You know, you might be using media playback, maybe you're using the internet connectivity to drop the content to it, but are you allowing people to have their own personalized apps, or are you building computing functions? So if you teach, say for example, a work group of engineers how to do particular calculations, and that's part of their professional development and training on how to calculate, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, flow rates or something like that, or calculate efficiencies of a specific class of products that you sell, that's great. They need to know that. They need to at least have working knowledge of it. But you could actually build applications that help them do that. And learning can be part of that. That's no longer just IT or operations, because oftentimes it's been kind of like this whole, like, fix it in post, like the items get thrown over the fence after the application is launched. Like, oh, now we got to build training on how to train our employees how to use these systems. Well, because the way that these applications are developed, agilely, iteratively, you know, in a continuous product management process fashion, learning can get out in front of it, get invited to those meetings and talk to people so that, hey, can we actually do some of these? Can we use the devices and the applications themselves to help them learn how to use this process? Can we put the content inside the application, maybe as a coaching mode or a tutorial mode, directly inside the app, so that they don't have to go to the LMS, access an e-learning course on how to use an application? That would just be the worst case scenario, right? So some really cool stuff, I think, at least. I'm a fan of it. We get into concepts related to design and development processes, and we see these terms thrown about. The book goes pretty in depth into them. The concept of responsive design, adaptive content, multi-screen delivery. You know, I would say that the days of the disclaimer on your learning courses that say this course best looked at or on IE8 with 1024 by 768, that is long gone, right? We can't live like that any longer, because the newest iPad Air has basically a, 2048 by 1024 or something like that resolution, but the iPad Air 3 or 4 or whatever is probably going to have double that. Right? And then there's going to be the 6 Plus has a much larger screen than the 6 does, has a much larger screen than the 5. There's only 10,000 different Android devices and all the screen real estate that they have. So constantly chasing the device resolution or the screen size is a completely futile battle. So we need to get out in front of that, understand how things like responsive design, how adaptive content works, how we can employ it, how we can use it to our advantage. You know, it is a consideration or constraint that we have to work within, but it is also a tremendously powerful and freeing design tool. And no longer do we have to focus on designing what the back button and the next button looks like when people can control their screens gesturally by swiping, right? It kind of takes a little bit of design load off of us because people have been trained how to use these devices themselves. You know, if you need to create, how many of you have ever created in the early days of CBT, here's how you use a mouse, right? And you put that before every piece of e-learning content. Can you imagine if you actually, here's how you use a touchscreen? If you put that on a phone, I think I would probably instantly delete the application, right? We don't coddle our users, and we don't, you know, pander to those types of things, but we need to take advantage of those types of design considerations. So mobile optimized sites, new focus on user interface and user experience, a move from what I would consider stakeholder driven design to user-centric design, where we actually have to go talk to the people that are going to be using our applications and software. It's not L&D knows best, it's not IT knows best, it's users know best. And the only way to actually do that is to go out and talk with people. This is a really cool opportunity actually to go out, reconnect with your learners, your audiences. I like to use it as an opportunity. I kind of enter spy mode when I go out there. I'm like, where do they have Post-it notes hung up? What have they printed out themselves that we didn't supply them? What do they have stuck onto a copy machine? What do they have laminated that they have like on a keyring binder that they're hanging off their workstation that we didn't create for them? All of these are avenues because they're learning in the situation. It's referencing, they're looking up information, and all of these are potential gaps that L&D can fill by creating really cool, powerful, useful tools. But we don't do that in a vacuum. Going on and on from that, one of the things that we talk about is how to leverage context, how to do things like create digital publications. Right? We have an army, a library, if you will, of PDFs and all kinds of Word documents and spreadsheets and things like that. How do we make sure that those work really well on a device? And how do we take advantage of things that the device allows us to do, like zoom and pan around inside of an image, not just show the image, but we can actually turn it into a 3D model and have them spin it around and look at it from the other side. And all kinds of stuff that you simply just couldn't do when it was just a simple, straightforward paper PDF. Now they've got the device with them. We can push updates as the digital publications need to be changed. And this area of the book goes pretty in depth in all of that. There's another new word on this slide here that maybe is on your radar, curation. Number 4, the importance of curation for successful mobile experiences. I don't think that I would ever advocate that a company should transition or move all of their content wholesale, just plop it onto a phone or onto a tablet or any wearable platform or whatever. We need to pick and choose which ones are going to be actually effective. If there's basically no chance that someone's going to want to learn or access this type of content when they're away from their desk, why spend or reinvest in rebuilding it for anything but the previous delivery methods? At least until there's been some sort of edict passed that particular technology's been sunset or something like that. It doesn't have to be a huge budget breaker. You don't have to think, oh, we have to move this 500 e-learning courses over to mobile by the end of 2015 or 2018 or whatever your roadmap or timeline is. Pick and choose. Find the ones that actually work. Curate this content down. So if you have a 60-minute module and it looks like it's highly likely that they may access it when it's mobile, does all 60 minutes of that instructional material actually even need to go over to mobile? I would venture to guess that if it's an e-learning module and it's about a highly in-depth topic, like one of our clients is an agri-science company, right? And they'll actually have, in part of their new employee onboarding and orientation, they have information on basically the history of organized agriculture. Like when man first put a seed in the ground and grew something that they wanted to then later use or whatever. Right? I don't think that information needs to go over there. But basic product information, absolutely. And that may all actually be in the same module right now because of the way that the subject matter experts like, no, well, they need all that background information. It all has to go in there. It probably doesn't have to go in the mobile experience, right? We can curate, we can redesign and funnel and create an experience that's a little bit more focused There's a lot of new information that's out there, obviously, on social. There's a lot of information on how to leverage location. You know, I mean, I've used the map application. I use Google Maps. I don't use the Apple Map app because it's crazy and would have me driving off of a bridge. But I use maps all the time. How can you use maps to help your learners get things done? Getting from point A to point B, obviously, but also understanding potentially even related information that might be around them, or information sources that might be around them, or where the break room is because they have cake. You know, you can do all kinds of amazing stuff with these devices. We do talk a little bit about the Experience API in the book as well. How many of you are already using Experience API or XAPI solutions in your place of work? Got like 2 or 3 people. So Art and Duncan from Risk, they definitely are using XAPI. Give them a shout out. But the Experience API is a new learning specification. It's a protocol for transmitting information from basically a learning records store, yet another acronym, an LRS, and the end user or the client, right? And it's tracking learning experiences, but user experiences really of any sort. It's experiential data. Somebody looked at this, somebody interacted with this. It's SCORM++. And it's not confined to an e-learning course. It's not confined to a learning management system. It's not really confined to even to just purely digital solutions. You could use it for tracking classroom attendance, for example. You can use it for audience response. You can use it for annotating documents. You can use it for a really wide variety of data and information that you may want to have some visibility into how your learners, how your users are interacting with systems that you're creating for them. So this is kind of where the pipes and tubes and all that other types of stuff come into. How do we get information into our mobile applications? How do we send information from our mobile applications back up to the servers? How do we connect our mobile applications to the rest of the enterprise? Because we're not an island. You know, we've operated in a very isolated or cloistered mode for a long time, but I think it's probably pretty clear that all industry is moving to a connected company model, right? You see it in big companies like Microsoft. There's one Microsoft now, right? That was a big strategic initiative a couple years ago where they consolidated all these business units, and it's no longer about like Windows versus Office versus Xbox versus, it's all together, right? And we're seeing that type of realignment, this consolidation across a variety of different vertical markets. And we're seeing that then even at a micro level where departments, marketing is getting a lot like sales, right? Sales is getting a lot like marketing. Marketing is getting a lot like learning. Learning is getting a lot like marketing. We're sharing assets between all of these types of departments, right? Our systems all need to talk to each other. You know, how many of you have a learning management system that connects to the company single sign-on? That's a base example, right? But then there's also learning management systems now that snap into or talk to Salesforce. And there's learning management systems that talk to or snap into SAP or other larger Oracle systems or anything that you're using inside of your business for productivity and, you know, how you get things done. It's only a matter of time before that performance data and your learning data finally will be able to be matched up or married up. It's like a pie-in-the-sky dream, but it's happening. It's happening in small doses right now, but it's definitely occurring. And all of these types of integration points are helping that to occur. So what does that actually look like? And this chart is available in the book, but it's also in the deck, and the deck is going to be shared out with all the attendees as well. But you see here, there's a ton of overlap. There's a lot of overlap, right? L&D is interacting with marketing in order to get things like graphic design assets and working with their content strategy. They're working with designers, maybe outside of learning and development, in order to understand what mobile user experience design is like for the rest of the enterprise. They're working with developers to integrate help desks and support systems into their learning experiences. They need perhaps maybe more advanced development and programming. You know, mobile is still in a state where you do need to know how to code in order to do it really well. There's not any simple app creation wizard tools that are out there that produce anything of real merit. There are some simple, very marketing heavy sites out there that'll tell you they can turn any website into an app in like 3 clicks, but that's a pretty superficial app, right? It's generally speaking read-only, not user-generated content. It's not going to integrate with the rest of your system, so on and so forth. So you see pretty quickly development gets very complicated, which leads you then into talking to IT. You need to, again, be able to figure out how you're going to deploy these pieces of media, what the installation process is going to be like. How does this factor into the rest of the employees' security landscape? What happens to the data that's collected in the applications, right? It's very integrated. It's a kaleidoscope of technology fun. You've got to have business analysts, you have to have strategy, you need to have understanding of the change management processes that are going to be put in place in order to make sure that people know that these tools and avenues are now available to them. It's some really kind of amazing stuff, but it requires you to roll up your sleeves and get into it. We talk a little bit about managing a mobile learning project implementation. So talk a little bit about this real quick, and then I think we're going to start moving over to have some time for questions. But the concept of the standalone, in it, done, move on with your life kind of project is also, I think, coming to an end. We're realizing that in order to produce things that are sustainable, we have to keep basically at least a trickle of effort and attention devoted on these applications. Keynote decided it was tired, I guess. So we're moving away from a project management model to a product management model. These mobile applications aren't set it and forget it. You don't build it and then revisit it a year from now. You're constantly monitoring and checking its usage and checking the content that's getting pushed through it and looking at how users are interacting with it and responding to their feedback and responding to their help requests and interacting with the community that's actually with these devices, with these applications, how they're using them in the field. So you're constantly adjusting. Facebook releases a new version of their application to the Apple App Store every 2 weeks. I'm not saying that you need to release a new version of your mobile learning application every 2 weeks, but it's not out of the question that you could be looking at having a new major release every quarter, or maybe even every month. Development sprints, agile development, iterative development. Again, user-centric design isn't something that just automatically happens. It takes effort, it takes practice, and it takes a completely different mindset. And that ultimately then takes a totally different budgeting process, procurement process, relationship with your vendors is going to change. There's going to be a lot of things under that all might be kind of some ugly bumps in the road at first. But related to that, then, it doesn't mean that you have to basically, part of that budgeting is do everything all at once. So if you don't have a platform for mobile learning, meaning like a delivery mechanism or, say, for example, a brand new LMS that's like mobile fancy. I just made that up. I don't know if mobile fancy is. It's not a term that most people use in the industry. But if your learning management system isn't mobile fancy or ready or whatever, it doesn't mean that you have to hold off doing mobile until your LMS is mobile ready, or you hold off on mobile until your organization has all of their ducks in a row from a mobile technology strategy perspective. You can do prototypes. You can do some pilots. You can get some feedback and survey the users and find out what their requirements are. You can go down that road and try a few things out. Be ready to potentially stub your toe. You may fail. You may create a stinker of an app. But if the audience is relatively small and they provide you great feedback and you can learn from it, even a failed app is a success in that regard, right? A failed outing doesn't mean that you failed as a designer or a developer. It meant that there was a lot of things that you could learn. And that's, I think, a change in mindset as well. That's for a long time, learning and development has been like, we aren't going to release this until it's perfect because we're only going to get one shot at getting this content into the learner's hands. They're never going to come back to it. And so they're not going to look at it except for maybe once a year when it's compliance time or whatever else might be, or whenever they get a move from one department to another or something along those lines. So therefore, whatever we put out there has to be fully formed, baked, just perfect, right? And mobile doesn't really work that way. A mobile learning experience that's successful isn't one that a user accesses once and then they're done with it and they never access it again. I'm in Twitter 20 times a day. That doesn't mean Twitter's a failure because I'm using it all the time, you know. Twitter's not a failure. They're worth like billions of dollars. I'm sure they're fine. But that's a completely different mindset, you know, and that's a different way of looking at what a successful outcome for something that you build and design is, right? We've been focused on, well, it's a success if everybody scores an 8 out of 10 on the assessment at the end, or it's a success if we receive, you know, 99.9% compliance that everyone's access to this. You know, maybe we should be looking at taking the folks down in marketing out for coffee or lunch and be like, how do you guys measure success of your efforts and engagement and usage? And maybe there are some things we can learn from them in terms of creating a measurement plan that fits more in line with how people use these devices in a very realistic and meaningful way. So I guess what I'd say as just some parting thoughts, and then we'll open up the floor for some questions, would be, hopefully, you saw that there are a lot of moving parts. There are some pretty important components to getting like a full-fledged or robust mobile learning strategy in place. But hopefully, at the end especially, we talked a little bit about it, that you can start small. You don't have to be paralyzed with the fear of, oh, we need to have every answer in place before we try something. It doesn't work that way. Also, another thing I think that if you read the book comes through as well is that you shouldn't suppose that you are the only source of that content, which I mentioned at the very beginning. People are going to learn with these devices via a variety of different sources, and you don't have to be the one that creates all of them. There are a lot of really useful and very powerful tools out there that are in the marketplace. Salesforce One, for example, is a really great application that interfaces with their CRM in a very mobile-friendly way. So you don't have to build a mobile front end for your CRM. Evernote. Any of you use a tool like Evernote or something, or OneNote or whatever, right? You don't have to build your own note-taking and information repository application. There are a lot of sources that are out there. Survey what's in the productivity and utility and education space already, and see, are there ways that we can bring some of these existing $1.99 apps to our users? You know, maybe some of them are even free. And can we connect those to our sources, to our employee knowledge repositories, to our cloud file storage, to our single sign-on, whatever we might be using? A lot of these organizations actually have volume purchase programs too. So if the application is $10 and you think, oh, I can't afford $10 per user for this particular application, reach out to the developer. Maybe there's a way that you can buy them at a discount. And I would say that related to the concept of this multi-screen delivery, the overriding theme of curation and the creation of a content strategy, a plan for that content, is of vital importance. When was the last time you created or did a content audit of all of the materials that you've produced and currently have in circulation? If you haven't done one ever, you should. If you haven't done one recently, you certainly should. And if you haven't done one but you're considering moving to mobile, you absolutely should. So take stock of what you've got, start to identify which ones might be useful in mobile use cases or when people are away from their desks, and that will give you at least a starting point from which you can build or design a pilot or a prototype around it. Pick one of them that's going to have the highest impact, could potentially get some, good visibility and people have been kind of clamoring for, and then go back to the source material and determine what of that is good and something that you can actually take back to your learners for an opportunity for you to learn on what they want to do with mobile in their workplace. I'd like to open up the floor for questions. If you want to hit me up, you can email me at chadu@floatlearning.com. I'm also on Twitter at visualrinse. My company is on Twitter at floatlearning, and again, that's the URL for the free excerpt for the book. So what questions might you have? Okay, here's a question for you. I'll turn it back on you. What is an application that you turn to when you need to get answers? Google, yeah. So, I mean, we're pretty comfortable with search in general. Are there any more specific or tailored experiences that we use or that you might potentially be accessing beyond just a basic search engine? LinkedIn, you find answers and things that you might want on there? Sure. Anybody here a Quora user? Quora? It's a question and answer kind of community source Q&A website. And I subscribe to Quora, a few different topics. I get an email from them every day in the morning. It's kind of good reading when you're having your coffee or whatever. And people ask questions and then experts come in and they answer them for all kinds of different topics. Everything on like how do weapon targeting systems work on fighter jets to how did Princess Leia actually remember Padme as her mother when she died at birth, and in the first movie she said that she remembered her mother being sad. It's a timeline error, right? So like, it's got questions and answers of all ilk. I mean, every type of thing. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of geeky stuff in there, but there are some really interesting things related to business strategy as well. And they get some pretty good people from all walks of life and even all levels of expertise coming in and answering those types of questions. How about anybody here a Vine user? V-I-N-E? You can learn a lot of stuff on Vine as well, and those are 6-second videos. So this is kind of a fun experiment. You know, we talk about mobile having this content being in a snackable form. You guys ever heard of that? Snackable content, right? 2 minutes, right? Like real bite-sized, train stop size is what I'll call it, grocery line sized. You know, something that you can consume really quickly. Well, Vine is 6 seconds. And if you want to try and hone your skills as an instructional designer, try and teach somebody something with a 6-second video. Now, you can do it in time lapse, so it's not like 6 linear seconds. You can slice the time. But I have a Vine up on my account that I show how to install a Nest thermostat, like one of those smart home thermostats, in 6 seconds. And it's got every major vital step and how to install it. You can pause it, stop it, go, you know, and see exactly how you would install that. And there's a lot of content like that on Vine. There's a lot of goofy stuff, like Will Sasso and comedians doing all kinds of funny jokes and everything like that. But it's a pretty vital or a valuable little learning tool as well. Reddit. Get a lot of answers on Reddit, right? Especially if you dig deeper into like the subreddits of topics of your choosing. Everything from gardening or home brewing to video game tips to home improvement and beyond, right? Reddit. And that's a very mobile-friendly website as well. Pinterest? What do you learn on Pinterest?
Every sort of do-it-yourself as well as feeds for people you're interested in. So even they have a bunch of e-learning feeds out there. And it's a quick little infographic or
Yep.
click on it and get more information.
And do you use that on your mobile phone? Absolutely, right? They have a pretty nicely designed application. And you can manage a lot of the stuff that you can on their full site. You can create your own boards and do all kinds of stuff on the Pinterest mobile application. They haven't confined their experience like you got to be in front of a computer in order to use Pinterest, right? It's pretty open. Anyone use or have you heard of a website or application called Twitch? Anyone heard of that? So Twitch is a huge video gaming community, and there are thousands of streams going on Twitch right now where people are playing games. You can tune into somebody's channel, watch them play a game, get your own tips on it, right? So it's a video game social network / webcasting streaming network, right? And yeah, it's fully mobile. I'll actually watch Twitch and learn strategies on how to do something within Clash of Clans or whatever, right? Or League of Legends or whatever game you want to play or something like that. You can learn quite a bit there. So some of these applications obviously might not be appropriate for inside your 4 walls, but they all have by four walls I mean at your company, right, or your organization, but they all have learning experiences that could potentially be mimicked, modeled, adapted, or brought in, right? And that becomes a pretty easy thing to pitch to your executives. It's like, think like Pinterest for our workforce mixed with YouTube. And like people will get that type of stuff, right? They'll understand it. Yes, in the back. Okay. So the question is basically Google Glass, or perhaps I'll just extend it to like wearable and maybe even more specifically smart glasses as used for mobile learning tools. What's that kind of trend? What's going on with that right now? Well, Google Glass specifically, the Explorer program has been discontinued. And Google Glass in its current incarnation is basically done. Google will bring back Glass in some shape, form, or whatever. They'll probably lower the price, maybe make it a little bit more rugged, maybe make it integrate with eyeglasses. I don't want to try and suppose too much of their product design. But wearable and augmented reality glasses or smart glasses offers a tremendous opportunity for the workplace. There's a company that made a pretty big splash at CES this past year, the Consumer Electronics Show, called DAQRI, D-A-Q-R-I. And they have a product that they call the Smart Helmet. And it's actually a OSHA-approved helmet with camera on the back and in the front, and a visor that flips down that provides just-in-time augmented reality information. So the use case videos that they show, they actually are showing somebody like basically at a gas facility, gas line facility, or electrical plant, and they're using it to interact with and inspect the gauges. So if you've got somebody that's got like a clipboard and they're walking around and they're writing down the meter readings and everything like that, you could actually perform that using optical character recognition or computer vision. So they're learning about it, but they're performing their task, they're doing their job by virtue of having the augmented reality on their head. Float currently has in process a contract with the United States Department of Defense where we're working on some augmented reality applications specifically based around facial detection and also cohort locational awareness. So where are the other people on your team and how do I get to them via augmented reality display, amongst a couple other types of use cases that are pretty interesting. So is it there right now? It sounds kind of science fiction, but there are a number of organizations that are already piloting them actively. You might have seen Virgin Airlines in 2014 had a program where all of the gate agents were being equipped with augmented reality, and were able to use that to scan the boarding passes and get concierge information about their frequent flyers, and then provide a higher level of customer service if you're so deemed worthy, I guess. But there's a lot of really interesting things that wearable represents for the workplace. And Apple's watch, you know, is all the reviews point to say that it's like the best smartwatch that's been created, but still not really quite great yet, you know. Shows a lot of potential. Think about how useful mobile is, but then all the limitations. You know, I have to have either clean, free hands or gloves that support, you know, capacitive touch screen. And I need to be able to basically take my gaze away from something in order to use it. Well, if you're standing in front of a moving turbine and you're wearing safety gloves or something like that, that doesn't really make it a great use case for mobile. But it could make it a really great case for wearable or augmented or something that you can talk into, right? Voice response systems. So, and these are all ways that you could get just-in-time information, knowledge, transfer, whatever. Communicate, send messages, talk to other people that are in your workplace. Do I have any preference in LMS systems? Float. Okay, so Float, as a consultancy and strategy company, we are pretty platform agnostic. We do work with a variety of different learning management systems, and all of them have some varying levels of mobile compatibility. There's been some study in this space. I think that actually the e-learning guild just recently released a new listing of mobile learning management systems that have some mobile compatibility. I think Patty Shank was the one that might have authored that paper, if I recall. Most all of them are making some level or movement or push into them, and all of them have their own differing strategies. Some of them are going responsive web, so they're making their learning management system available through a web browser, but making the content and the user interface adaptable to work for a tablet or a smartphone. Other ones are going the app route, and they're creating surgical or scalpel-like mobile-focused applications for the instructor or for the learner or for the content creator or whatever it might be. So in terms of which ones I would recommend, I would have to say that you need to look at your company's mobile technology strategy and then determine if the learning management systems that you're evaluating support, embrace, and extend that technology strategy to the learning space. So I'm trying to be really tactful here. There are some that do it better than others. There are a lot of them that say that they're mobile, but really it's just it's lip service. What I would say is if they're putting out their best foot forward, they're letting you know about which features are available in mobile and which ones aren't. They're going to be very clear about that. They're going to provide you some level of visibility, maybe even into their roadmap, where they're thinking that mobile will take them in 2015, 2016, 2017. They're going to talk to you about that. They're going to have a plan in place for a responsive design, and they may actually have a companion app strategy as well. I don't think that it has to be one or the other. I think that it should be a yes and. Okay? Now, we do have some partners here. We do work with the folks at Risk, and they've got a pretty sound and solid mobile strategy going forward. I'll say that for them. Yeah, it's an interesting space. There's other ones that are in the market: Litmus, Expertus One, a variety of other ones. The smaller companies I find to be agile enough that they are moving into this mobile space a little bit more quickly than the juggernauts. The juggernauts they might say that they have mobile, but what they have is a fresh skin on an old platform. They're not reinventing their platform for the new mobile delivery. If you liked any of these thoughts, you can go and download a free chapter of the book right now. If you just go to float.ly/mml-book, you can download a free chapter. And then also, if you like those but you want to learn even more, my 2012 book, Learning Everywhere, How Mobile Content Strategies Are Transforming Training, also has a free chapter available. And if you just go to floatlearning.com, you'll see links for both of those books pretty clearly. Again, I would really like to say thank you so much to ATD Houston specifically, folks like Debbie Richards for inviting me down here. I really do appreciate the opportunity to get a chance to speak and meet with all of you. I'll be out for the remainder of the day. We do have a booth. We're kind of tucked away around the back of the corner, but if you want to talk mobile, I'll be here. Come talk mobile. Ask me whatever questions. If it's too embarrassing to ask in front of the group, I can take them one-on-one. It's all good. It's all good. Okay? Thank you all so much. Thank you.